Let's go. Muy buenos días a todos. Espero que me puedan ver y escuchar. Perfecto. Gracias por su paciencia, por esperar y vamos a empezar en unos minutos. Esperamos hasta que también los últimos ingresen y después empiezo oficialmente este webinario. Ok. Pues cambiamos al inglés porque hemos dicho que este webinario va a ser en inglés. Well, good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure to see you all and yeah, to welcome you here at our first webinar in 2022 of the Swiss Chamber of Commerce in Panama. The topic is about dual education and its implementation in Central America. And the webinar was organized together with the Swiss Embassy in Costa Rica. So this is why el señor Derighetti también está con nosotros, Gabriele Derighetti. Y so I see that today we have more than 60 participants. And from the information that I got through your registration, I know that people joined us from different countries. We do have participants from Costa Rica, from Guatemala, Panama for sure, and also from Switzerland and the United States. So welcome to all of you all over the world. My name is Jessica Löpke. I'm the Executive Director of the Swiss Chamber here in Panama. And as the Chamber of Commerce, we consider ourselves as a constructor of bridges in order to foster and facilitate the trade between, in our case, Panama and Switzerland, but in general also to promote topics that are very important for Switzerland. And in this case, we are today here to talk about the dual education system of Switzerland. First of all, let me please introduce you. The premium members of our chamber, which thanks to their financial support, make events such as today's event, make it possible so that you can join it for free. And now I'm pleased to introduce you to the Swiss ambassador, Senor Gabriele Derighetti, who is the ambassador for Costa Rica, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Panama. And he will guide us through to the session today. And before I will pass over the word to him and give him the stage, I would also like to introduce you. Sorry, I skipped the slide. I would also introduce you to our special guest, which is Professor Ursula Renold. She's the Chair of Education Systems at the ETH Zurich University. And yeah, she will give us an introduction to the dual education program, the Swiss one, and also talk about its implementation and, let's say, export to foreign countries such as Central America. Regarding the schedule, we will start with an introduction by the ambassador. And then right away, there will be the presentation held through Professor Renold. The presentation will be around about 45 to 60 minutes. And then afterwards, there will be a session of questions and answers. So feel free to already share during the presentation questions with us through the chat. And afterwards, you will also have the opportunity. So our Swiss ambassador will take care of the question and answer session after the presentation. Let me also give you some insights, based from the experiences that we made with this huge audience today. It's easier to to introduce some rules, which are, for instance, to mute everyone, and so that the communication will be between speakers and participants through the chat. Let me also mention that Professor Renold shared with me the slides of this presentation. So afterwards, I will be more than happy to send you the slides via email. And we are saving and recording the session in order to make it available to you through our channel on YouTube. So if ever there may be questions arising afterwards, feel free to contact me. And here you will also see the contact in order to join our YouTube channel. I will also share this information to you with by email afterwards. So enough from my side. Let me wish us all a very exciting webinar right now. And now I will hand over the stage to His Excellency Gabriele Derighetti. So the stage is yours.
Gracias, Jessica. Buenos días a todas y a todos. Muchas gracias por su participación. Gracias a la Cámara de Comercio, a Jessica, a los socios premios, con los cuales coorganizamos este webinar. Ustedes han visto, Suiza está presente en la región, no podemos estar presente con embajada en todos los países, pero tratamos de estar presente con alguna institución en todos los países. Es así que tenemos una Cámara de Comercio en Panamá, una embajada acá, tenemos en Costa Rica, una embajada en Guatemala también, oficinas de cooperación en Nicaragua, entonces cubrimos toda la región. Y esa es la idea también, de vez en cuando, de hacer webinar o discusiones que muestren o que incluyan participantes de toda la región para ver un poco cuáles son las diferentes experiencias. El tema de formación profesional, dual, porque ahí hay muchos temas, mucha manera de llamarlos, y la profesora Renold nos va a explicar también qué es uno y qué es el otro. Es un tema muy, muy querido por Suiza, parte de también del éxito del país como Suiza, pero no estamos acá para venderle un producto y para tomarlo copy-paste y para copiarlo. No estamos acá para venderle un chocolatito suizo que uno puede comer así directamente. Es para explicarle un poco por qué ese sistema, no solo por Suiza, pero para muchos países en el mundo, es importante y va a ser aún más importante en este siglo. ¿Por qué ese sistema es crucial para cumplir, por ejemplo, muchos de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible? ¿Por qué ese sistema ayudó a un país como Suiza y otros a tener éxito? ¿Cuáles son los actores que están alrededor de ese sistema? And I think to explain this, we can't have a better interlocutor, a better professor than Ursula Renold. She had huge experience in this issue on vocational education and training, not only as an investigator, as an academician, like she is today among many other functions, but she was also part of the public sector. She was the head of the Federal Office for Professional Education and Technology, is kind of a Secretary of State for Professional Education and Technology in Switzerland. But she started her career as an apprenticeship in a commercial bank in Switzerland, so also with the private sector. And this is very typical also of this system. So I think she has this broad experience, and she had this contact with all the sector, private, public, academic, who are also crucial in order for the vocational education and training system to be successful. So I'm done with this because I will give the floor to Dr. Arello for the presentation. As Jessica said, feel free to share your question. The idea, I will close the seminary, and the idea is also to make a follow-up in each of the country also of this discussion, that we can also follow up on the discussion that we have today, maybe with some physical presence, because we start to do again some seminar, not only webinar, but also some seminar and some nice meeting and encounter between us in a physical way. Let me close here on my side. Dr. Renold, the floor is yours. Danke vielmals. Bitte.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, dear Mr. Derighetti. Dear colleagues from Costa Rica, I see that there are a lot of participants in our CEMETS Summer Institute who are joining. Dear guests, dear organizer, Jessica Löbke and the Chamber of Commerce, it's a great pleasure for me and Dr. Katie Caves, who is with me today. She is the director of the Center on the Economics and Management of Training System, and she will help me also with your question in the chat. So feel free to load the chat with question, because it's definitely a good thing if we can talk to each other. The topic, as you have heard from Jessica Löbke, is about dual education and its implementation in Central America. And basically, I will introduce you to the following 5 topics. Why is this so-called, I call that labor market oriented education or dual education, or some people are calling that VET, vocational education and training, or even with a T before, technical vocational education training. Why is this moving into the focus around the world? The reason is digital transformation as an accelerator. I will come back to that. Then, as Mr. Ambassador has informed you, basically a lot of people think this is really something to export from Germany or Switzerland to other countries. I can tell you this is an illusion. It's not possible to export a system from one country to the other. What we, however, can do, we can learn what are the challenges when it comes to this changing the social system. And we have a lot of experience, also a lot of research with regards to these challenges when it comes to re-engineering of another system. A major aspect, I will call that this is a constitutive element of a dual education program, or if you want to talk about a system, then it comes to the question, how do actors from the education and employment system work together? We developed a measurement tool. It's a diagnostic tool for partner countries to measure whether the collaboration between these actors from both sides is intensively enough that you get the outcome you are looking for. I will present you that instrument shortly so that you get a glimpse what it means and whether this is something maybe for your country to start with. Then the CEMETS, this is our reform laboratorium at the ETH. It's an international education reform program where we have here, I would say, about 20 people. I saw there are a lot of people from the INA who are joining us today, Institut National de Apprentissage, and they have been through this program either this year or a couple of years before. And this is what we offer to other countries so that you can learn what matters with regards to re-engineering an education system. And I will show you snapshots of what we are doing there. And also at the end, I bring you maybe the most advanced case from the United States, where we work with different states, what they are doing and why it takes time. That's then my 5th point. Now, about starting with the question, why is vocational education and training or dual education in the center of political agendas, topics, multinational organization? All these institutions are looking for solutions because they start to realize that the so-called college for all strategy will not work. Will not work means with regard to prepare young people for a decent life. And the reason behind now why this digital transformation is becoming the driver or the accelerator of pushing dual education in those agenda is the digital transformation leads to a basically fast change of requirements in the labor market, because processes, products are changing, and across all occupation, you need these digital devices and the digital products. And this is in that regard a problem for education system, because they are the opposite. They are very slow with regard to updating curricula, content, material. So we have two different paces, and that produces the big problem. People doing a full-time school program, and I would say not only on the secondary education, it affects the university also. If you are constantly provide the same training for students or learners, you are not ready. People are not ready for what the labor market is looking for. And this is across countries. And that's why that is a reason why vocational, or let's say dual education, a combination of exposure to workplace learning and to the general education, is now in the center around the world. That's the only solution how we can prepare the people for the labor market. We are doing some studies, and here you just see a snapshot. I would expect that if we do that in Costa Rica and Panama, Guatemala, you name it, we will see a similar picture. When we ask companies, what are you looking for if you hire new employees? What are the competencies? Then you know, always they want to have everything, you know, on a scale 1 to 5, everything must be perfect. But the reality is that they don't get what they want. And here you see on the y-axis how important are skills for company. And trustworthiness, reliability, motivation, commitment, friendliness, resilience. These are the most important competencies. Advanced math is also there, but it's not the most important. And this is very important to understand. So these are competencies which we generically call soft skills. Or in the United States, you can hear to the term 21st century skills. So what is that 21st century skills? These soft skills, these are skills which schools are more struggling to teach that, because what is a good, you know, friendliness standard? What is a good teamwork? And then here you see when we ask companies to what extent are these competencies important for you, then obviously we ask as a next question, what do you think, which is the best place to learn these competencies? And here, very simple, companies report, this was a survey done in the state of Colorado in the US, the ideal place to learn that type of skills is the workplace, also in the US. We have similar results for Switzerland, and everywhere where you are doing that, you are ending up in a similar results. And this is for us a good starting point if you want to create an initiative with companies in a certain country, because if companies are reporting that they think this is the best learning place, the workplace to learn, well, then you have to tell them, please be part of our initiative. We need you as a partner in our reform. Here you see not just only United States or other countries, even in Switzerland, we have here a good source from the University of Zurich showing the very long-term trends. What is the labor market looking for? From 1950 up to 2014, you see some trends. The yellow curve going down is basically saying the labor market is not anymore looking for people having just a compulsory education. That means in Switzerland, mostly these are people with a migration background. They could enter the labor market, but if they are getting out of the labor market, they are not anymore in demand. Another trend, the blue line, is basic professional training. This is the typical Swiss dual education. You see 50% of all job vacancies are looking for a type of vocational education training. In Switzerland, the backbone of the Swiss industry are people having this 3-4 year dual vocational education training, and they are still on demand, even though I have to say, you see at the end, there's a consolidation, let's say, with about 46%. Then what we also see is the black line saying that higher education. In Switzerland, this is not just university. We have a professional education and training sector is becoming very important. That means you and me, over our lifespan, we have to retool ourselves to be ready to cope with the requirement on the labor market due to this digital transformation. So these are the general education trends. If you have a look at the green line and the red line, red line means soft skills and green means experience. So this is extremely fast growing trend of the demand. People need to have soft skills and work experience. Now, we did a lot of studies around work experience because mostly we want to know who is affected, because people having a dual education, they are not affected. They have their work experience through an apprenticeship. However, university graduates, these people are affected. So nowadays, and I guess you agree with me, university graduates need to do 2-3 internship before they get an unlimited contract. And this is the same thing in Switzerland nowadays. In Switzerland, the good thing, these are still paid people. In the United States, these people are not anymore paid. And that is a sign that the system, something is wrong. So we come, there's digital transformation challenges the education system worldwide. And our hypothesis is education and labor market actors need to be linked together. This leads to a better outcome effect. And in this box on the right side of the slide, you see what are the reasons behind. Learning on the best available technology. If a university or a school needs to constantly reinvest in the best technology, let's take the manufacturing sector. Nowadays, you have to have the CNC machines, robots, drones, 3D printers. If a school has not the budget to reinvest in this type of high advanced manufacturing tools, then you are outdated. And we are saying this is not necessary that the school invest constantly. If you cooperate with companies which do have a certain technological standard, then the young people can learn on this best available technology in the specific countries. A second part why workplace learning is important is learning from different role models. Soft skills cannot really well be trained in a school setting. You have a teacher and a class with about 20 to 30 people. And if you have a good teacher, it's good. If you have not a good teacher who is not really good in soft skills, how can you learn? How can you imitate a good role model? In a company, you have at least an exposure to a lot of adults and you can learn what is good behavior, what is not good behavior. The last one is the last advantage of workplace learning exposure is learning work relevant skills from the beginning. From the first day on, you learn what matters. And I can tell you, I was, and I'm proud being a former apprentice, because in the age of 15, 16, you want to become an adult. And if you are exposed in an adult team where you can work and do meaningful things together with an adult group, this is the best way how you became an adult. And at the end of the day, you're happy because you did something useful. And that every day. And if you have good instructors who helps you on the way forward, that's the best thing. So education system have a comparative advantage when they include the workplace as a learning location. And because Switzerland is the world leader with regard to that, we have 70% of young people enrolling in vocational education training. The whole world is looking, what are we doing and how is that possible that so many people want to first do a vocational education training. I come back to that later on. A substantial dual VET, vocational education training, exists in only a few countries. You see here a snapshot from the OECD, where the light blue part is general education program, either high school, full-time schools at the secondary level. The dark blue is a so-called school-based VET program. You have vocational education training, but it's only in a school environment. And the black part of this column is a combination of school and workplace dual education. And you see, I highlighted Switzerland. We are the world leader with regard to the percentage of people doing this type of program. And at the other end, United States, we are working with a lot of states. They are always angry if they see that, because they are claiming they have junior vocational high school or something like that. But it doesn't really matter, because the percentage is too small. Now, I would say for Central American countries, there would be a similar picture on the overall. It's mostly, if you have something, then it's mostly school-based. And all these negative effects I just mentioned before would appear that in most of the cases, you are affected by high unemployment, or young people not getting a decent job with and a good quality. Now, what can we do? So the main message is all countries have to change their education system sooner or later if they want to prepare people for the labor market. The challenges of changing social system are the following. It's a very simple problem to explain how what is an education system with regard to program and codes, and what is the employment system. And here the problem starts. Basically, the program in an education system, all teachers and principals of schools and officials from ministries know you need a curriculum for a program. This is basically the education plan, which helps the student, the teacher, the schools to plan the activity. And at the end, we hope that students get to education. The code of that system is passing or failing. At the end, you decide whether the student pass or fail. And that leads then to the career of the student. That's very simple, the rationale of an education system. The employment system has also a program and a code. The program is the market, the labor market. And it's about supply and demand of trained specialists. The better they are trained, the higher normally the payment will be. So the code is the payment, the wage they get if they are really well trained. So these are the two systems which we have to bring into the focus. That's why I'm telling this is dual education. Dual means a combination of activities in the employment system and in the education system. If you want to have now a good VET curriculum, you have to anticipate what's going on the labor market. Here the problem normally starts, because how can the education leaders know what the labor market is looking for? In most of the cases, the curriculum are created by teachers, by principals, by officials from a government, with more or less inclusion of people from the employment sector. And that's the first big issue, because then you produce students which are not prepared for what the labor market is looking for. Then the next step is the institutional factors and the time period, how you can change. If we have to anticipate that there is an education system and it's an employment system, we need to understand what are the institutions in that overall ecosystem: government, educational providers, intermediary organization in the employment system, such as Chamber of Commerces or professional association, then obviously the companies themselves. And it depends on the political system of the country. If you are a federalistic system, you have this multi-education governance, where we have to figure out what is the role of the national level, what is the role of the state level and the local level. And depending on the size of a country, you have this multi-level labor market regulation. For example, in the United States, we are not talking about one labor market because Texas or Massachusetts are different regions and have different requirements. This institutional setting here, I consider as extremely important because that affects what we call the curriculum value chain. All the part processes from a curriculum design to the application to measuring the outcome effects, and then hopefully the feedback phase where you update on a regular basis a curriculum. Now, you can already imagine why it's so complex to change the system and why it takes time. Without a rapid change of the institutional framework, employer association or organization or equivalent, upscaling is very difficult. And here I just show you a timetable from the feedback phase where people come to the conclusion this curriculum is updated, we need a revision. To the new cohort, it takes you 10 to 15 years until you have really the numbers in your statistics. So it's too slow. We agree. So this is not the solution for the future. That's why we need a different approach. When we are working in our CEMETS with countries, we have to take into consideration not only the education system itself, but some socio-cultural factors and political factors, because they are crucial. That means in the United States, in most of the cases, the states are not waiting until the government is telling them to please do something, especially not the companies. For them, a so-called bottom-up approach is maybe the most fruitful one. Competition is the mantra in the US, and that's why if you stimulate the competition among teams, you may be quicker, you may have a quicker solution. In other countries, such as in Costa Rica, Cuba, Mexico, Serbia, there is maybe a different approach necessary because the government has a stake and the government has something to say and may have a strategy or vision where institutions want to follow. So you just see here what are some of our cases where we are working, which we are working with, and that's the next problem. Where do you start with your reform if you want to start a reform? Now, for me, I'm very, as Mr. Ambassador said, I'm very experienced with reforms due to my previous function in Switzerland, where I was responsible for about 300 reforms. From 2000 to about 2012, we had a big change of legislation, and in the implementation phase of new laws, you learn what does it mean to make a reform happen, to implement the reform. And what I've learned is the following cartoon. First, who wants to change? Everybody agrees on that. We need to change. Next question, who wants to change? Well, people are there, but they're happy if they are not in charge with. Who wants to lead the change? No one is anymore there. So this is really an issue, and that's another reason why a lot of countries are struggling with this re-engineering process. Many teams lack someone willing to lead the long-lasting and complex reform process. I can tell you, you get some gray hairs if you have to lead a reform over 10 to 15 years. These are problems. There are problems, hurdles, which you have to kind of tackle. And that's why if you have a good leader in your country, can be an employer, can be a politician, is someone who is credible, who has the big picture always in mind, who has good connections, a network to, organize things, fundraising constantly, your resources. What I learned from my experience now at the ETH is include young people with the potentials who can be developed into leaders. And we have good leaders in Nepal, Indiana, Costa Rica here. We are some of the leaders are here in this webinar, which I have seen in those countries. And we have to help them to learn at the beginning, what is leadership? Because no reform will work without having strong leaders and a constant investment in the next team. That means constantly working on capacity building. Now, the education and employment linkage is our diagnostic tool, which we want to shortly introduce you to, because this is normally the starting point where we help you to make the first diagnosis. What do we mean by coupling of actors in the education and employment system? You see here, our hypothesis is if people are working together along this curriculum value chain in each phase, you can expect better labor market outcomes. We have plenty of research now showing that there is an effect. So basically, this linkage is, in general, it encompasses all processes where actors work together. That means in the curriculum design phase, in the application phase, means how much time students spend in the workplace. To what extent is the employer engagement there? If it's just 1 or 2 hours per week, that's not enough, I can tell you. And behind are always theoretical foundation. We know in Switzerland, why are companies so committed? Because there is a business case. Swiss companies are paid off by their investment in apprenticeships. They get a benefit which is higher than the costs. And obviously, to understand that, how can you create a curriculum which then basically leads to a payoff? This is another journey, but this is what you learn when you are coming to our CEMETS. And after a certain time of application of this curriculum, you can measure the outcome. And by outcome, I mean, do they first of all get a good job? What is the income? How sustainable is their duration in the workplace? And last but not least, we should not be satisfied if we once set up a new program. We have to constantly reform it. Now here is the benchmark. We did that in several countries. You see the top shots with regard to highest linkage are Austria, Switzerland, Denmark, Germany. These countries are known for having the best dual education system with a huge exposure to workplace learning. On the other side, Chile, Japan, Costa Rica, Nepal, Colorado, here in the United States, which do not have really a good connection to the industry. Because we have Costa Rica here, we did some analysis in 4 developing countries where we have these low and middle income countries together. You see here this design, application and updating phase where we have the different dimension. Some countries are good in at least one phase, but in the overall, not really good. Here in Costa Rica, for example, workplace regulation is kind of good. However, and the information gathering too, but the qualification standard is not really done together with the industry partners. But Costa Rica has some advantages compared to Chile, for example, which is another Spanish-speaking country. That means for us there is room for improvements in the interinstitutional framework, and have that in mind. We need to check now what is the institutional framework in a country that leads to this kind of result. The overall strategy where we help a country to overcome the bad situation is we have to check whether you have a school-based approach. If you have this more school-based approach, then you should develop a labor market alignment strategy. Please invite the employers, the industry association, chamber of commerce to develop a strategy how you can come to cooperation. If you have more, for example, INA in Costa Rica is providing mostly non-formal courses, and they have connections to the employment sector, but it's not accredited by the education system. So what they need is a formalization strategy together with the formal education system. And all they say, if you marriage both, no, then you basically can come to the better system. Strong employer, all our research is showing strong employer engagement requires a strong institutional framework. And the institutional framework of a vocational education system describes the role of the state, mostly represented by one or more ministries on a federal, state, or local level, depend on the political system. And this is in most of the country a big weakness, the role of the private sector in the VET system. That means professional association, chamber of commerce, training companies. And then obviously you have a lot of other agency, we call that intermediaries, who can help, like in Switzerland, we have the Swiss Federal Institute for Vocational Education and Training. The Germans do have the BIBB as a teacher, as an institute which helps to develop a system. In Korea, they have the CREVET as an institute. In Nepal, they have the CTVT. So these are intermediary agencies who are knowledge partner on a system level. This institutional framework results from the assignment of each VET function. In the CEMETS, we teach people what are VET function, which makes at the end the system. And this function must be allocated to the appropriate political level and also to this partner in the employment and education system. If you want to learn more about how we analyze education system, we have so-called Factbooks on education system, which provides the first descriptive insight. And I show you here, before I go back, on our website, you get access to all these Factbooks. For Americas, we have actually the following one. If you are interested in having a fact book for your country, we would be willing to do that. Just send us an email and then we start to produce that fact book. The next one in the pipeline is Paraguay, for example. Now, going back to this institutional framework, a good example is what Costa Rica did. Now, you have seen Costa Rica has a low linkage intensity. In one of our CEMETS in 2020, in the CEMETS reform case, they came up with the conclusion we need to create an ecosystem with all our institutions who are involved in vocational education training. And you see here, TVET direct stakeholders, it's about 28 institutions. But not all of the 28 institutions are similar important. That's why they created a matrix with power of the institution and importance of the institution. And they come to the conclusion, these are the institutions, I cannot go into the detail now due to the time, where we have to manage closely. Is an institution, keep satisfied. We can inform them, but we don't need to deal with them. Here, minimum effort in these three institutions, and here keep informed. So it's the second circle, and this is a very good mapping where you see where you can invest your time and where you don't need to invest in time, because this is it will not help for the next step. I was extremely impressed when the Costa Rican team presented this analysis, because this is what you need to understand if you then want to create this ecosystem where the collaboration is becoming very strong. Now, CEMETS, I just mentioned one case, what the Costa Rican has done in 2020. But generally speaking, I'd like to introduce you in this reform lab. Since 2015, we do every year, we open that reform lab for countries who want to, together with us, improve their education reform case. Normally, we can accept 10 cases. Normally, it's physically in Zurich for 10 days. Due to Corona, we had to switch into a virtual institute, fully virtual institute. And obviously, like all innovation, we will end up post-Corona time with a combination of a part is virtual and a part will be in Zurich physically. What we are doing, we give you all the research findings we have so far with regard to vocational education and training, why it matters, what are the theoretical foundations behind, so that you can start to learn to apply to your own context. And we support countries initiating and implementing their reform case. This is what we call translational research. That means together with the partner, we create the research and we help you to overcome that. Here, just an overview. These are some countries which took part in our CEMETS. Some of them, and especially in the US, but also Nepal, Serbia, Chile, Costa Rica, obviously, they are coming every year because they want to have this follow-up for the long-term investment, the long-term reengineering. Here is a snapshot. If you have to work in a virtual environment, we need to have a platform. We are working with ETH Moodle platform. And what you can see is we guide you through the important topic, kickoff, but then it's one module is about system of education. What is a system? What are these functions? How you get to an overview in your country? The educational process, this curriculum value chain. What do you need to know behind? Key metrics, how can we measure things? And then we have a practitioner workshop with practitioner from Switzerland, with apprentices, all about workplace learning, what matters if you want to improve your workplace learning, public finance, the whole financial mechanism behind the VET system, all about labor markets, and then a closing session where we discuss the implementation plan with all teams. Now, to make that concrete, I choose this United States example with our pioneers from Colorado. Basically, as in a lot of other countries, they have a divided system. Costa Rica is similar. You know, we have the formal education system, which is pretty much here a one-way route. That means you start somewhere here in general education, and then you go up to the university, to the college system. There is no professional education and training sector as we know that in Germany, Austria, or in Switzerland. Apart from that, the US have a registered apprenticeship system, but this is not recognized by the education system. So for Swiss people, it's always a little bit tricky with regard to how we use words. If a Swiss person say, I'm an apprentice, that would belong in Switzerland to the education system. If a US person talks about an apprentice, it's like a labor market integration program. It's for the Swiss people here. It's the SECO motivation semester. It's a 6 months program. Has nothing to do what we call the dual vocational education program in the formal sector. So this is my first recommendation to check whether we have a formal system, education system, and what is considered as so-called normal, non-formal system. The Colorado case was at the beginning this leaky pipeline. Students starting, if 100 students start in high school, basically at the end, it's for 18 students, they are ready to go into the labor market. So the Coloradan people, this slide is from the presentation of that leader, they say the system is only works for 18 to 23% of the people. And if you are a leader in the education system, you cannot be satisfied with that result. That means what happens with the other 75% of people? Therefore, they want to say we have to fix that problem. And then we started with the measurement of this education employment linkage index. You have seen Colorado is not really high. Compared now to the Swiss score, the colored surface is the score of Colorado compared to the Swiss score. You see they have some activities together with the industry. For example, our companies involved in CTE, means career and technical education, both individually and through association. Yes, they have, but this item is not as important as this slide would be. So this graph helps them to understand where they are good at and where they have their weaknesses. Since we are now, since about 6 years or 7 years together with Colorado, they could establish a pilot program, Colorado Modern Youth Apprenticeship, together with high school. So the students are following the traditional high school and they have an apprenticeship apart. in the future, in 5 years from now, they want to have an integrated Colorado VET program with one credential at the end, recognized by the education system. But what you see here, the problem is still a dead end for those not being able to attend an associate degree or a bachelor degree. So for these people here, it's still a dead end. And dead ends in an education system are not attractive for young people. And that's why a lot of parents are claiming, okay, if my kid is doing an apprenticeship, what can she or he doing after the apprenticeship? Nothing. And that's why single pilot program isolated in a system is dangerous. That's why we are saying you need to have progression routes throughout the system, especially due to the digital transformation. My hypothesis, all countries need to have a PET, professional education and training for adults. So if you are, for example, in an insurance company and you want to become a line manager or sales manager, if you are 40 years old, normally you're not going back to the university doing a bachelor. If you would have an alternative program like a vocational education training, but for adults part-time, then maybe you would do it. So this is what we help countries to understand. If you want to start a dual education program, you need permeability in the long run. Now, Colorado, you see, they started in 2015. They join every year with new cases, and they are pretty much visible now in the United States because they could influence other states. So Indiana, New York City, Washington, DC, Washington State, California, Alabama are all states who take part in the CEMETS activity, because they start to realize if states in the US are working together, they could have an even bigger impact. And last year, we started even a CEMETS implementation lab in the United States just for coordination or coordinating all states in the US. That said, this is a little bit the impact we can see. Then Colorado learned from Serbia, because if you are 6 years in the business of reengineering of an education system, you may end up with 100 different projects. And that becomes a very complex endeavor. That means you need a master plan, which is nothing else than a coordination instrument with, you know, all the project plans, with the risk analysis, with the project organization who is doing what, and the milestones. And actually, Colorado did such a master plan because after 7 years, they start to realize the whole reengineering system is becoming over complex. They need to follow up all the different activities. That said, reengineering of an education system is feasible if you have a good team, an intergeneration team, young people and older experienced people. If you have very, you know, VIPs, very important people in your network, so that you can fundraise, make the connection to all political bodies. And if you have someone who can fundraise on the way forward. That said, I'm looking very much forward to your question. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Renold. That's why I told you it's not like selling a Swiss chocolate. We are not selling you a fixed product. I tend to say it's much more like a Swiss knife. It's a very good tool, but you know, it's very complex inside, you know, and it needs to consider all the actors according to the country where you are, because you can have 1,000 versions of a Swiss knife. Generally, the package looks similar, but then inside you have to consider, I think we saw very well with this mapping, which is also very important things to do at the start. So who are the whole authority institution? What is their interest? Are they even know about, do they even know about the system? And this is telling very well the complexity of this. If you allow me, I will also make a couple of points in Spanish also. Creo que los puntos claves a partir del cambio que la digitalización va a demandar a todos los gobiernos, a todos los estados en el mundo y que requieren nuevas habilidades. Habilidades blandas, habilidades técnicas, y de ahí viene, eso va a venir, no es una cosa de sí o no, eso va a venir y eso implica un cambio que todos los estados tienen que hacer para responder a lo que el sector privado, a lo que el empleo, a lo que el trabajo demanda. Porque al final vivimos en una sociedad donde hay que crear trabajo y el trabajo ayuda a luchar contra la pobreza, a tener la gente, pues es la base también de los estados donde vivimos. Entonces, ese elemento sí es muy clave. La necesidad de integrar todos los sectores, el sector privado, el sector académico, por supuesto los gobiernos, pero la necesidad de trabajar a largo plazo con jóvenes líderes. Porque eso es claro, se lo digo, eso no es un programa, muchas veces los ministerios de varios países me preguntan, queremos impulsar eso. Con gusto, pero eso no es algo que van a hacer y al terminar su gobierno tienen los resultados. No, señores, no, señoras. Esto es un trabajo de largo plazo. Yo soy ingeniero forestal y por eso siempre pienso en largo plazo. Yo los planes que hacía como ingeniero forestal eran a 60 años. Pero si uno no empieza a poner los árboles en la tierra, nunca va a tener los resultados. Y eso es la misma cosa con ese sistema. Hay que tomar algunas decisiones, empezar, porque eso se va a venir. Entonces, mejor empezar ya, pero sí es a largo plazo. Una cosa interesante es también cuando se habla de formación técnica profesional, dual y todos los diferentes términos, no es solo las profesiones técnicas, el carpintero, el electricista. Yo pienso los amigos de Panamá, donde el sector de servicios es muy importante, seguros, bancos, son todos sectores donde también se aplica ese concepto. No estamos hablando solamente del señor que viene con capacidades técnicas a fijar el sistema eléctrico. Y para terminar, se mencionó un poco más el caso de Costa Rica porque ha habido algunos contactos ya, tanto con el instituto de la doctora Renold, que con otros institutos, pero creo que es interesante ver, de ahí se empieza a formar un cierto ecosistema justamente que continúa a pesar de los cambios también a nivel de gobierno y que también tiene que ser reforzado por el sector privado, por ejemplo. Y eso es algo que en todos los demás países se puede hacer y eso es algo en lo cual nosotros, tanto como embajada que como Cámara de Comercio, con gusto lo podemos acompañar, diciendo es por ahí. Hay actores como el CEMETS de la doctora Renold que lo pueden acompañar en algunos, mencionó el handbook, que es una posibilidad de tener un handbook por un país, y mencionó el curso que ofrecen. Yo creo que son todos tools, instrumentos que es importante que le damos a conocer de esos instrumentos y que ustedes pues sepan que existen y que a través de nosotros podemos orientarlo mejor. Eso es lo que quería decir yo, agradeciendo una vez más a la doctora Renold. I will switch to the question. I have one. Can you explain the timeline to change the law in Serbia, for example? Who was in that team? Eso sí, buen ejemplo, ¿no? Serbia, que ya tiene ese plan, doctora Renold. Were there any champion, or what were the factors that explained that they did come to this?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a good question. It's a funny story. It's good to choose Serbia because here you see that it's extremely important to understand the cultural context and also the political context. Basically, the project starts because the current president, Mr. Aleksandar Vučić, has attended an international VPET conference in Switzerland. He was the speaker before I was the speaker. And when he was listening to my speech, which was a little bit similar to what I presented to you, he then later on asked me whether I can come to Serbia to help him. And well, I did that. And he said, okay, I want to have a law. And I want to have a law on dual education. And as Mr. President, I guess this is not the best way to start with because you don't know what works. He obviously did say, but in our culture, we need to regulate first something so that it's clear what people have to do. Well, I had to accept that and told him, okay, but I can tell you this law, the draft will not work, and I can explain you why. However, because I have no evidence to show you that my claim is true, I say, okay, let's fix 3 years of time. And within the 3 years of implementation, we do research, implementation research to figure out what works and what doesn't work. Now, actually, we are at the moment where the 3 years are over, and we know what works and what doesn't work. And the next step is now to meet the president again, to explain him one of the aspects. For example, when they talk about dual education in Switzerland, it's about 60 to 70% of time spent in the workplace. In Serbia, it's about 1.9 hours per week. So it's almost nothing. And obviously the cost benefit for companies is not there. I mean, they have especially cost factors. It's also the syllabus is not well prepared. So we have now a bunch of revision, but the good thing, we have now evidence, 4-year evidence, which helps then to mitigate all the stakeholders why the change in the law should go in the other direction. Another 4 year will come in front of us with the revision. Actually this year, this year should be the revision, next year implementation, and then it takes again, I would say 3 to 5 years until we see the fruits. But through the implementation research, we also can demonstrate the success, because gradually each year they improved and they did get more students in this dual education, which in my view is a big, big success. So that's the Serbian case.
Thank you, Dr. Renold. A question before, connection of local Ministry of Education. I think the question is more, can we do also pilot project on the local level, regional, province level, without having to wait for strategy at the national level?
It's a good point. Yeah, it's a very important question too. It depends on the country and it depends on the commitment of the government. For example, if you have a country where the government is changing all 4 years, and with that change, the whole staff will be exchanged, that's a big difficulty for long-lasting TVET reforms. In that case, I would recommend to work around, because what is anyway important, independently whether you are working with the government or without, you need the employer sector on board. And the employer are more stable in that regard. They are there, they want to improve their business. The only question there is, how can you convince company to be training partner? But in that case, if you have an instability in the government, or a government who is not willing to lead that reform, then it's obviously good if you start to work around and try to set up pilot projects together with companies. Well, I have to say, in some countries, it's not allowed for schools, for public schools, to run projects, pilot projects, without the approval of the ministry. So sooner or later, you anyway have to think at what time is the good moment to involve the ministry. I did some projects in India, for example, where the ministry was very conservative and complex, and in India you have to get the approval of the national ministry, which is obviously a big issue if you want to in Pune or Bangalore run a project. But it was good to inform them what we intend to do, so that you have them on board. But at the end, it was more important to get the companies committed. And then if you once have a pilot project and which works, you can demonstrate, and then mostly the government is more willing to be partner.
Thank you. An interesting question or observation from someone from the private sector. Intel Costa Rica starting a dual education program with INA in the next days. I don't know if Timothy Scott from Intel, he asked the question if he's still there, if we can unmute him. It would be interesting to learn or to listen why they decided to start this. What were the criteria? Do they need people? They're looking for a new, and what is their involvement as a private sector in this system? Can we unmute Timothy Scott?
we can do that.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
Well, actually, thank you very much. It has been I would say, long journey, but positive at the end. We had the partnership from obviously INA, also Industries Chamber, and the Board of Investment here in Costa Rica. So it has taken around 2 years to make it happen, and it will start on Wednesday. So our participation, very active since the beginning, from having INA's technical experts on our site, walking our factory floor, understanding what we do, what we don't do, and incorporating those activities as part of INA's curricula. So that's why it has taken so long, because we have to make sure that by the end of the process, students are going to be able not only to comply with their curricula, but also to be able to capture all the capabilities of working in a company as Intel. So I would say win, win, win. I would say 3 parts here. The students win, the company wins, and the country wins. These students will probably become part of our pipeline in 1 or 2 years once the program has ended. So in summary, very happy, very excited. We will have 13 students as part of the program starting on Wednesday. Something that we can definitely improve as an ecosystem is diversity, because we are focused on technical students. Unfortunately, we were able just to get 1 female as part of that group, and Intel is 100% committed to diversity and inclusion. So that was it. I don't know if I responded your question.
Thank you. Yes. Dr.
May I ask
Yes.
ask back to Timothy or to Eric Sandoval, which is here mentioned in your question? Eric Sandoval from INA, he's a CEMETS alumni. Is that now a formal program accepted by the Ministry of Education, or is it INA non-formal program? Because you mentioned the duration of 1 year or 2 years, and I guess it would be important to know that we know whether it's non-formal or formal.
I would ask Eric to respond that one.
Eric Sandoval.
Let me find him and invite him to unmute, because we have to invite him. He may be trying to talk, sorry. Okay, I've asked you to unmute, Eric, so if you can, go ahead and start speaking.
Okay, hello. You hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Ursula. Hi, Katy. Well, the program that we are going to implement with Intel is a program of industry, is a long of 2 years, and is vinculate and level 2 in the framework. In the qualification framework is level 2. It's like how many hours? Like 2,700, 3,000 horas aproximadamente.
Good, thank you. So it's still, for me, not so clear whether it's really a upper secondary education standard or it's just a part of it, I guess. But anyway, we can leave that open and clarify that later.
I think anyway,
on.
it's a step. Huh?
Yeah, it's a step. It's a step.
And it's interesting when there is a company in the private sector that also has really the interest. I think this is a very key and important actor to have on board.
Yeah.
I don't know if there are other questions. I would have a short question for Dr. Renold. Is it also important to change? It's a kind of a cultural change also, that we understand that in order to have success in life, so to speak, you don't really need to send your kids you not only need to send your kids to university. Is it important to have this cultural change of the mentality?
Yeah, of course, it's very important. And that's why I'm saying in Switzerland, it's so easy to explain that, because decades, Swiss people have enrolled, the majority of Swiss people, 70% of each cohort over time, over decades, enroll in vocational education training. That means the parents know what is vocational education training because they had made their own experience. That's why it's easy. And if you have 70% of people in VT, there are some Einsteins in that route too. That means we basically are not saying VET is something for other people's children. No, we are saying VET is for everyone. It just depends where the young person in the age of 15 is. So take me, as I'm actually at the highest ranked university, a professor in Switzerland, but I started my career with an apprenticeship. You know why? Because in the age of 15, I was in this storming, forming phase where adults becoming difficult, where I just want to become an adult, and I had enough of school at that age. And if you then have a system that helps you to just for 3-4 years to work and learn in an adult setting, that changes lives. And later on, I did the academic baccalaureate. I did my university studies to progress in my careers. But I'm proud of having had that chance to do an apprenticeship. And I think this is underestimated in a lot of countries, that in this adolescence phase, you need to have alternatives to just this full-time school approach where in most of the countries, 50% of the cohort of young people are not ready to move on to school. So that said, I would say this is my story to parents. You want to have happy kids, but the happy kids are not happy if you just push them through a school which they are actually at that moment in their life not able to follow. So this is for me a little bit the selling point. And we can also say, look, if your kid in the age of 15 is enrolling in a vocational education training, they end up with 2 tickets. One is for the labor market. They earn a decent income. And second, a ticket for further education, because our system is totally permeable. So there is no dead end. And that's why this is what we discuss in the CEMETS, what is the story you can tell to politicians, to parents, why an investment in vocational education training is a good thing. But you were asking the question, cultural change takes time. And you can go faster if you start to enlarge the number of people. I mean, Costa Rica for me is a wonderful example. I guess I know that Jacqueline Garcia is here and Silvia Camacho, and they have the list of all stakeholders. I would say we have 200 people who are our network in Costa Rica. And that means these people have now a higher awareness what matters and how it should be organized. And obviously, it takes time until you set up these new programs, but you have to work parallel on different routes. Communication, look, your events at the Swiss Embassy, extremely important, just to raise the awareness. The whole communication strategy is extremely important, because people need to start to digest all facts and figures, which we know from these countries. Even in Switzerland, I find sometimes people say, oh, vocational, and say, okay, I confront you now with the facts. Lowest unemployment rate, VET students, best return on investment. I have a bunch of evidence, but it's not known in the society. And that means you need to have ambassadors. That means all our CEMETS alumni, which are here, are kind of ambassador. They know what is a system. And then as soon as you have a pilot project, Colorado is doing a great job. They know how to do marketing in the US. They produce video clips with young people and their parents telling what was the experience in such a program. Yeah, unfortunately, I tell you, it's an intergeneration project. Sorry to say, but it takes 20 to 30 years until you have a system in place, which you call a system.
So better to start now.
Yeah.
Question about Colorado case on the permeability between the formal and non-formal system. How can we read more about the implementation? Don't really get the...
How can we read more about implementation of that case or of formal and non-formal? I mean, two aspects. Colorado, yes, they have this non-formal system and the formal system. And in Colorado, they try to align that. And this is what we are doing in Nepal, by the way, too. In all cases, you have to consider on the same time the big resource of non-formal courses. This is good developed in Central America, I would say in all countries. This skills training, you know, short-term courses is normally good developed, but it's not recognized by the Minister of Education. And that's why I'm saying here you need a kind of a formalization strategy where you work together with the ministry and develop so-called recognition of prior learning procedures, RPL. This is how you can combine formal and non-formal programs. And the instrument through which you can do is, for example, a national, in the US, a state qualification framework, or in national countries, a national qualification framework. Eric Sandoval, he just have mentioned that in Costa Rica. So this is a tool, and then what we do normally are analysis. If you go and have a look at our Factbooks, we have a description of all education system in a similar way, where we can identify where are the missing pieces. Why is the education system in a certain country a dead end for a majority of the people? And that is then the start of the communication. Okay, where do we start now with re-engineering the system? I hope this helps.
Thank you. The other one is not really question, but it shows that it's interesting also the case of Intel, and I'm sure there are others also private sector, but it shows that it's a common effort. I mean, it's as we saw in the presentation, you must have several actors in order to have this work. Otherwise, it's difficult. I don't know if there are other questions. Try to look at the time. Maybe less chance for another question. Or Jessica, if you have one, or
there is one. You mentioned state private cooperation and intermediaries. How do you see the role of social and civil actors?
I didn't saw that.
Yeah, that's also a good question. I mean, I've shown you this mapping from Costa Rica. What are the 28 important institutions? They have even more. I just show you one slide. There are even more. And it's about the social dialogue with civil actors and social actors is extremely important. But it's all about priorities, you know, power and priorities, and at what stage you start to engage the civil society. It's, for me, a part of the communication strategy, but at the beginning, if you want to set up such a project, you may have other priorities to deal with first. I would say the civil society could help you with you know, raising the collective awareness in the society. But in order to do that, you need a showcase. You need to have kind of a concept which is compelling to all people, and then they can spread it out.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I saw there are in the chat there's more information on the Colorado project for the one who wants, and in the presentation you will have the contacts both of the Chamber of Commerce and CEMETS, and you can ask, I think, all the questions you want. I think we will leave it here if there are not more urgent questions. Thank you very much, Ursula Renold and our colleague in Zurich of the ATH and the Swiss Chamber of Panama. I think for the follow-up, you know, we don't want just to do something like this and then be quiet for the next years. I think it's like Dr. Renold was saying, it's also a role of us to regularly talk and raise awareness on this topic regarding Costa Rica. We have already a group going on, and it will be my pleasure to convene meeting meeting to discuss. I find it interesting also that the private sector is starting to play such a role in this. And I think this you have someone who is committed as an embassy of Switzerland. We are committed. Again, we are not exporting something, but we are truly committed, truly sure that this is something that has to be done, and we have experience to share. It's just a matter to share. You know, I'm not even promoting the private sector of Switzerland. You know, I'm very happy that Intel, who's not a Swiss company, is already doing something on this. So, but you have an actor committed to that. And the Swiss Chamber of Commerce in Panama, we have a committee on education, generally speaking on education, but focusing on technical vocational training. And I think there as well, we need to discuss with Jessica how to start to convene some actor. I found it interesting, for instance, to start to have an idea of the ecosystem or an idea of what is the labor market in Panama demanding as a skill. Because the first slide of Dr. Renold was extremely interesting to show, you know, if you ask the private sector, they come back and say, we need those kind of person. And maybe then we realize that education is not providing this. I think this is something that maybe we could do in Panama as a first step to launch and to raise awareness on this topic. And in Guatemala, I know that my colleague also in the embassy is also promoting TVET, and it will surely come back to you with this. With this, I thank you all very much for participating. Muchos saludos desde acá a todos los amigos y las amigas en América Central. Y bueno, que tengan un excelente día y hasta la próxima. Gracias a todos y a todos.
Gracias a todos.
Gracias. Chao.
Chao, chao.